Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome along to this latest round, the first round of a brand new Formula One season here in 2022, here at the Bahrain Grand Prix. Brand new cars, some new drivers on the grid as well, and the first night race of the season. It's all to look forward to here at the Sakira International Circuit. Look at this then, this clockwise circuit with 15 turns, 3.3 miles or 5.4 kilometers, with three DRS zones, and with three separate detection points around the lap, allowing for a real combination of different strategies and tactics from the teams and cars. Of course, new cars this season mean that they should, in theory, be able to race one another a bit better. But before we get into that, let's take a look at the results of qualifying yesterday. So it was Ferrari and Red Bull on the front row, with Charles Leclerc taking pole position and Max Verstappen then completing the front row. Then it was the other two cars with Perez and Sainz, then Russell, Norris, Ricciardo, Ocon. And then we had Bottas, Mick Schumacher as well, doing very well in the Haas, ahead of their teammate Kevin Magnussen in 11th. Then Alonso, Tsunoda, Hamilton having an absolute disaster in qualifying. And then Gilligan, one of the debutants, in 15th. Albon, Gasly, Zhou Guanyu, another debut in 18th position. Then Sebastian Vettel and Nicholas Latifi at the back of the grid. So then, with all that being said and done then, of course, the focus in this new season is going to be all on these new cars and how well the drivers can then start to go racing one another. Of course, the big talking point, as we look at Esteban Ocon here, the new race winner as of last year at the Hungarian Grand Prix. Big talking point heading into this season is reducing the outwash effect, that dirty air phenomenon, as we start to go through the corners, see if there's a reduction in that overall loss of performance there, and hopefully the cars will be able to race themselves much better than they were before, and we'll be in for an action-packed season. Taking a look at some of those on the grid then, Zhou Guanyu, driver from China, first Chinese driver ever in Formula One, and lining up in 18th today, as we say. But before we head down into it, let's go to Will Buxton and see what is all new in Formula One for 2022.
Hello folks, and welcome to Paddock Pass, your pre-race edition for this, the inaugural round of the 2022 Formula One World Championship. And I've got to say, it feels great to be back. As is tradition, there is something of an air of a first day back at school on arrival here. But it's more than that, because the new era of Formula One has arrived. And with it, the eagerly anticipated new car regulations, which have been designed to help promote better racing. With clean sculpted lines, swooping rear and front wings, which should allow cars to follow each other more closely, new eye-catching 18-inch low-profile tyres, the return of ground effect, and a reduction of aerodynamic physical adornments, the new cars look strikingly different, all while improving safety and pushing the limit of technical ingenuity. So then, which teams have interpreted the rules most effectively, and which drivers will adapt to their new car the quickest, leading the charge against the rest of the pack? Only time will tell. As always, we can't wait for this season to begin, but for now, from us, that's your...
So thank you very much to Will Buxton there for giving us that insight into the new season. But here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 red lights. Lights out, and it's go for a new season of Formula One. And down towards turn number 1 we go. Charles Leclerc has gotten a good march on the rest of the field, and Sergio Perez looking to maybe have a challenge at Max Verstappen, maybe Carlos Sainz as well down into turn number 1. Further back down the order we can see there's a bit of movement there between the field. Lewis Hamilton has jumped up the field enormously versus their starting position of 14th, up to 12th now, nearly 11th when they were fighting there with Kevin Magnussen, and now up the hill they go towards turn number 4. No DRS yet, of course, because we are only on the first lap, and look at that, Mick Schumacher up the inside on Esteban Ocon, up into P8, up 2 positions off of their start there for Schumacher, so very good driving from the young German. Of course, last season in the Haas, that car completely abandoned in terms of development, all focusing on this year, and certainly from these opening few corners, it looks like that has all paid off and gotten them off to a good start this season. Meanwhile, further down the order, we can see then the likes of Daniel Gilligan here. As we switch over to them, they have lost positions off the start. Started P15, manages to get that Aston Martin into Q2 in the start of this season, and well, they've now gone down the order. They're now fighting with Alexander Albon here. Seeing the two of them going side by side through turn 10, very tricky corner around this Bahrain International Circuit, but now up to 11 they go, surely not round the outside. It is round the outside. Gilligan gets the move done on Albon there, no contact between the drivers, and away they go then up the hill and towards the end of the second sector. Looks like Albon is not going to be out for this one just yet, though. Bit of a touch and a slide there from Gilligan. Bit of a mix in tyre strategies going on in the field at this point. Of course, you can see on Gilligan's Aston here, you've got the hard tyre, and then on the Williams there of Albon, there was the medium tyres. Mediums also for Lewis Hamilton at this early stage of the race there. As on the timing tower, you can see that swap of positions there for the Aston and the Williams drivers. But here then, no DRS yet, simply just pure car performance at the final turn, down towards turn number 1. Then we go Lewis Hamilton side by side. But no, instead of defence for Kevin Magnussen, it turns into attack. Look at this then. Valtteri Bottas now having to fight side by side with Kevin Magnussen, who was being overtaken into turn 1, it seemed. But no, he ended up doing the overtaking. Now then, Bottas is going to be trying to get this position back here. But if they fail to do that, it's going to be them versus their old Mercedes teammate, Lewis Hamilton. Look at that. Big slide for Magnussen. And Magnussen dropped back down into P11, so no change at the tail end of the points and just outside of the points as well. And so this is all looking to be a very interesting, tasty little battle here with Hamilton trying to make their way through. Of course, no DRS still because we haven't hit that third crucial lap yet. And, well, if we do end up seeing some DRS passes, then I would imagine that's going to come from the Mercedes before anybody else, really. They have such a quicker car, as we've seen from George Russell's performance in qualifying and from their general form in pre-season testing as well. So as we continue to watch them then, let's take a look at George Russell. Just half a second off the back of Max Verstappen at this stage, as they head through into the start of the third sector. Third sector then is all, and look at this! Verstappen is going slow! What on earth has happened to Max Verstappen here? It looks like that car is going slow. Is this a retirement for the Dutchman, for the reigning world champion? You can see that number 1 on the car there. And what has gone wrong? I think it's a puncture. A puncture for Verstappen on the front right. You can see there it has a different look to it than the rest of the tyres. It looks uneven. Oh dear, and for Max Verstappen then, this is the absolute worst case scenario for their title hopes. On-board camera, you can see they're just confirming what I suspected before, and so into the pit lane comes Max Verstappen. They're going to drop all the way back to the back of the field. In fact, they already have done. And that means then that they need to get that Red Bull serviced and back out there as quickly as they can. Interestingly, Red Bull opting for soft tyres at this stage of the race. You would expect that to be hard tyres, given that they want to maybe try and just get all the way into the end of the race now, or possibly leave themselves options later on for a late race soft stint. But look at this now. Big scrap going in at the sort of mid part of the field. Zhou Guanyu has made some enormous strides from their 18th starting position and now up to P12. Brilliant move there from Zhou Guanyu. All the way up to P12 now, and you can see there in the background that the Williams that we were looking at earlier on with the Aston of Gilligan and Albon, they were still tucked into a little battle there as well. This is the thing that we're seeing throughout this field. Oh, and a lock up there from Zhou Guanyu. You can see a puff of tyre smoke, and then it looked as though Tsunoda might just be able to get themselves around, but didn't end up working for them in the end. So down towards turn number 12 they go. A brief view from the driver's eye there as we then headed into that turn 11 corner, and then back up the hill we go. And apart from that gap between Hamilton and the car in front and behind them, because of course they've been starting a bit off the pace of where they should have been, the gap's still very close throughout the circuit. No closer, in fact, than what we can see here with Valtteri Bottas now. Deciding to go from the overtaken to overtaker. They've repassed Kevin Magnussen and now look set to get past Mick Schumacher as well. But Schumacher managed to have the DRS. Look at that there. They've got that rear wing open. So Bottas would have been just fractionally ahead at the detection point in the final couple of corners then. And now as they head into turn number 1, then Schumacher's going to have to hang it all the way around the outside here. And it might be that they end up losing out to their teammate. We cut away from that action though to see this. Look how close things are here. The Alpine of Fernando Alonso all the way down in P14. Gilligan threatening them into turn number 1, but it didn't quite work. You've got to get up earlier in the morning to outwit the Spaniard in Formula 1 here. And now as we watch them coming down the back straight, they're now threatening Alexander Albon. Round the outside of Albon they go. And that's P15 then for the Brits. They are back up into their start. No, P14 in fact, as Carlos Sainz is now DNF'd. Carlos Sainz now out of the race in their Ferrari. So that means that Gilligan is one position up versus their start now. So it has taken them 4 laps now, 3 and a bit laps really, to recover from that mistake at the start. But yeah, things looking good for them now to be able to capitalise on that position there. You never know, maybe if the stars align, there could be some points in their offering for the Aston driver there. But given how off the pace that car is, along with the Williams and along with some others, it's perhaps unlikely. And given that they've got some cars around them very quick indeed, Verstappen will unlikely come back through, will more likely, I should say, come back through the field here. This is looking very much like a good scenario then for a good debut performance. Just to be able to hold position would be a good one there. Kevin Magnussen then, confirmation they have gotten past Mick Schumacher, and Schumacher now overtaken by Lewis Hamilton as well down that back straight. And so it's Magnussen versus Bottas round 3, I think, now, because, of course, we had the initial move from Magnussen down to turn number 1. We then had a counter move from Bottas that we didn't get to see, and now, down to turn number 1, may it be the over-counter from Kevin Magnussen round the outside, and they're able to do what their teammate could not, or it looked that way. It looked that way, but then through turn number 2 and 3, it looks like they've had to duck back in behind again. Now they've got DRS once more on the run up towards turn number 4, all the way uphill here. It doesn't look like it looks all flat from the track angle, but there we go then. Through turn number 4, and somehow Bottas has been able to keep that Alfa Romeo ahead. They are absolutely stubbornly holding on to that position, and this is proving to be some fantastic racing. Anybody who had any doubt at all as to whether these cars would be able to follow one another or whether we would have good racing in 2022 are sorely mistaken, I think. Meanwhile, however, behind, interestingly, Mick Schumacher has gotten themselves back past Lewis Hamilton. Not an easy thing to do by any means, and certainly not when you've got a car so much slower than the Mercedes that the Haas is at this stage in the season as well. And so they are now right tucked in behind their teammate Kevin Magnussen. And so as they head back up the hill then towards the end of Sector 2, start of Sector 3, there you go, that's the split point there. We are expecting then that we may have another good scrap here between these 4 cars down in towards turn number 1, but we'll wait and see on that one. Carlos Sainz then out of this race. It sounds as though that is an engine failure for them, so very unlucky indeed. George Russell has dropped down the field as well. Now, whether that's a planned pit stop or whether that is something else that's happened there, I'm not entirely certain, but what I do know is that in towards terminal number 1 we go now then, and it is Magnussen up the inside this time, so they're now going to be able to try and hang it round the outside of Bottas, but no, once again Bottas resists, but this time it's not enough. Bottas has to concede the position there, and they fall down to P7, Magnussen up to P6, but it could soon be a Haas double whammy here, up in towards turn number 4, it looks like maybe wheel-to-wheel contact between the Haas teammates, but crucially Mick Schumacher has gotten P7 there. So, Bottas in the wars, loses 2 positions in nearly as many corners, or just over that many corners, I should say. And now then, as we continue to watch this battle unfolding here, we now switch to the McLarens. The McLarens now up in P3 and 4 here, and it looks like, oh, big mistake from Daniel Ricciardo. Their race winner in Monza last year is now, maybe they're out of the race actually, they're parked up on the exit of turn number 10 there. And I wonder if they're just hesitant to get going because, of course, you've got this stream of traffic moving past them now. Even everyone as far down as Vettel, who's the effective back end of this grid at the moment, obviously barring Verstappen and Russell's interesting collisions and other things that they may have been involved in. Verstappen, of course, having an unlucky puncture earlier on lap number 2, of course. Esteban Ocon then is up into P4, just behind Lando Norris, who now sits on the podium once again in his Formula 1 career. There's still a very long way to go, of course. We're now lap 6 of 29. And would you look at this? This virtual safety car then has prompted a bit of action in the pit lane. So Charles Leclerc comes in for a set of soft tyres on that Ferrari. Interesting decision there. Same decision going on at Red Bull as well for Sergio Perez, right behind them. And so this is going to be an interesting one then, as to whereabouts they end up shaping out later on in this race. Now, it's a free pit stop, of course. They are going to be able to quite handily bypass an awful lot of their immediate competition. However, because we can see now Valtteri Bottas and Lewis Hamilton staying out then during this virtual safety car period, it means that they have jumped up to P1 and P2 in this race. Bottas and Hamilton in 1 and 2 is something which you wouldn't necessarily have batted too much of an eye at a year or even more ago, but this year, with Bottas being at Alfa Romeo and that Mercedes not quite being there, it's an interesting turn of events. Looks as though we may have transferred now to a full safety car, and yes, in fact we have. And on screen at the moment, Daniel Gilligan then starting on the hard tyres. That strategy gamble has paid off for them really, because they can now go deep into this race and be much higher indeed. So P6 for them, P9 for Sebastian Vettel, who I believe is on the same strategy, and then for others in this midfield as well. Yes, look at that then. So Norris onto the back of Vettel now, and those white striped hard tyres on the Aston Martin. So when we get racing again, it's likely, of course, that the likes of Norris and Ocon and Magnussen and Zhou Guanyu and so on those fresher tyres behind and 2 grades softer than Vettel, should be able to make their way past him relatively easily. And then, of course, for those cars rather in front, so your Latifi and Gasly, for example, they will probably be relatively easily dispatched as well, given that they will be on relatively warm medium tyres at that point. So all things to consider, all things to take into account here, as Daniel Ricciardo then, having caused the initial safety car call out there, that being the virtual safety car. Now, whether or not something else has then happened on track to then prompt the full safety car, I'm not entirely certain, but they now have caught the back of Alexander Albon. They will be another of these fast-moving cars out of position, and therefore being able to get themselves up the order much more efficiently than others. This is also going to give a massive lifeline, of course, to Max Verstappen and George Russell. Those drivers who are still, even now, after we've been running behind the safety car for a full lap now, as they come across the line, and Bottas will take us over the line there in just a moment to start lap number 8 of this race. Or in fact, no, it's lap number 7. No, there we go. It's finally ticked over. Lap number 8 then in the Bahrain Grand Prix. Verstappen still at this stage, 4 seconds off the back. You can see them there now starting to approach. And there is Max Verstappen. So yeah, given that we had done a whole lap behind the safety car and they were across the line only about 4 or 5 seconds off the back of the slow-moving snake of the field, that indicates to me that Verstappen was really nowhere in a proper no man's land, as was, of course, George Russell behind them. So there we go. Things looking good then. So to give you a rundown of your race order at this stage, now that the field has all bunched up again, you have Valtteri Bottas in the lead of this race, driving for Alfa Romeo for the first time in his Formula 1 career. Then Lewis Hamilton in second place, up from P14 on the grid. Then our pole man, Charles Leclerc, followed then by Sergio Perez, who was in third at the start of this race. Then Fernando Alonso, Daniel Gilligan, Pierre Gasly, Nicholas Latifi, Sebastian Vettel, Lando Norris, Esteban Ocon, Kevin Magnussen, Zhou Guanyu, Yuki Tsunoda, Mick Schumacher, Alex Albon, Daniel Ricciardo, Max Verstappen, and George Russell, with then our one DNF so far of the race, that being Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. Not the way he will have wanted to get the season off to a start, especially when that Ferrari is now so much more competitive than it has been in previous seasons. And so yeah, we'll wait and see then as to how Sainz's season shapes out. And we will, of course, wait with bated breath for the restart of this race. Now, when we start to see green panels around the circuit, and when, just as we see now, no lights on the safety car. So that then means that they are coming in at the end of this lap. And we've now also got then Bottas essentially becoming the de facto safety car at this stage. They have to now control the pace. They can't aggressively brake or accelerate and then come back down to another speed again. The moment that they set off and put their foot down, that is when they are deciding to restart this race, and that's when things are pretty much fair game. Technically, they can't overtake until the second safety car line or the start-finish line. But as we get going again, then Bottas has planted it. And they're hoping that Ferrari power unit in the back of the Alfa Romeo is going to give them the grunt they need. But down the start-finish straight then, Hamilton is getting closer, and you can see as well behind we've got Ocon then under threat, or actually making a pass here. No, not Ocon, that's Alonso in fact. Alonso there having a move and completing a move on Sergio Perez. Gilligan has been able to hold off Pierre Gasly for now. And then we've got, they've been overtaken by Pierre Gasly, in fact. Nicholas Latifi then was bearing down on them briefly as well, so that restart not working out for the Aston Martin driver. But further down the order, we've got Daniel Ricciardo overtaking Alex Albon, Verstappen, and Russell still struggling at the back end of the field here. They're needing to find their way past Albon as quickly as they possibly can. Albon and Verstappen, of course, former teammates at Red Bull. And, oh dear! Ricciardo gets damaged. You can see that end plate skirting off of this circuit there, and they are going much slower now, and you can see that damage. The front left part of the front wing there completely gone on the McLaren, so that's not going to do them any favours in terms of them trying to get their way back up the grid and up the order here in this one. They're now fighting with Alexander Albon. We can see from this onboard shot then that the McLaren straight line speed is greater than that of the Williams, so clearly a low drag setup, or just lower drag car generally for them there. But things then up at the sharp end of the field here looking a bit more interesting. Charles Leclerc then has got themselves nice and close to the back of Lewis Hamilton, pulled out to the right hand side, up the inside in the last corner, and it's 2 moves! 2 cars potentially, no, they just lose out on traction to Valtteri Bottas. I'm certain they will pass him down the start-finish straight there, though. As they do, Charles Leclerc retakes the lead of this race, but it was a dangerous and risky, audacious move into the final couple of corners then. But it looks like Bottas isn't giving this one up just yet. They managed to come back a bit on that start-finish straight, but now sweeping round their outside. The move is done for Charles Leclerc. They reclaim the lead of the Bahrain Grand Prix, and that then means that Bottas is down to second, and Hamilton now is seeing their opportunity perhaps round the outside in turn number 4, and Lewis Hamilton shows us why they're a 7 times world champion. They get all the way around the outside, Valtteri Bottas, and they start to tear off after Charles Leclerc. Brilliant bit of scrapping going on. Sergio Perez just behind Bottas has been able to get by Alonso again. And Alonso now has Gasly for company. Kevin Magnussen is right tucked up behind. Oh, look at that there. There was a collision there between Yuki Tsunoda and the back of Kevin Magnussen there. Tsunoda going for a Hail Mary move into the turn 8 complex there. But yeah, that was very dangerous there. They could potentially have lost a bit of performance. No parts have come off of that front wing that we've seen there. Latifi now going for a move on Sebastian Vettel. Knocks Vettel back down out of the points for now, but as they go through turn number 11, is that going to stick? Yes, it will. Latifi all the way around the outside. Very good move from them indeed. And look at this then, sliding all over the place is Yuki Tsunoda in that Alpha Tauri. They are looking very racy indeed, excuse me. And up at the front end, Sergio Perez now past Bottas as well. And Vettel now having to defend from Magnussen on those much fresher soft tyres. And into the final turn they go. Magnussen goes deep, it looks like there, but then on traction with the fresher soft rubber, they will be able to get a good drive there. But it looks as though they're not going to have DRS. And it might be that Vettel has either got a car that's set up brilliantly for straight line speed, or they may have the DRS themselves at this point. Has it come back online? I don't think it has. Oh, no, there's a mistake there. A lockup from Kevin Magnussen. So is that going to give Vettel an opportunity there in terms of the straight line speed? It looked like the Aston didn't quite have it on the Haas there. So now, yep, DRS open. So it has been reactivated on this lap. So may not have been active down the start-finish straight. And, in the background there, Max Verstappen suddenly saying hello there to Zhou Guanyu, sending it up the inside and nearly getting up the inside of Mick Schumacher as well. This is some great racing and good fight back here from the one-time world champion. And as they see to try and defend their title here in 2022, well, that's going to be an interesting story over the course of the season. If they're able to get themselves back into the points here today, then of course that will limit the damage. But as it is, their title rival of last season is in second, Charles Leclerc is in first, and their teammate Sergio Perez up in P3 as well. So Perez having a good showing for Red Bull this weekend. And as they head down this back straight here, this DRS straight I should say, we then switch our perspective to Lando Norris and their chase down of another Mercedes powered car, that being Daniel Gilligan in front in the Aston Martin. And so they then are seeing themselves climbing up the order here. Now another driver climbing up the order is Sergio Perez. They are now having a good scrap with Lewis Hamilton up at the front end of this race here. We're keeping an eye on Norris for now, it seems. But yeah, it's been an interesting rise for Gilligan. They won in F2 as Norris came second, of course, in 2018. And George Russell won the category as well in the same year. So conventional route up into Formula 1. And then, of course, when Aston Martin was retaken over by Lawrence Saunter, it meant that Lance Stroll and Lawrence Stroll were forced out of the team. And that then meant that they have the 4-time world champion services as well as the F2 champion. Look at this then, round the outside. Sergio Perez gets the move done on Lewis Hamilton. And that then means that that's another position gain for the Red Bull driver. They can now focus their efforts entirely on managing to close up that gap now to Charles Leclerc, which has opened up to 4.3 seconds. Shows you just how off the pace the Mercedes are this year when they've been they were nose to tail at one point earlier on in this race, in this phase of the race even. As we see here, Bottas desperately trying to defend their position in the Alpha ahead of Fernando Alonso. Now Renault's engine in the back of the Alpine, of course, the only team being supplied by Renault this year. They have admitted that they are not as high on power as they would like, nor reliability. And so it could be that Alonso ends up having a bit of a tougher time then against the Alfa Romeo here, even with the help of DRS, because of course the Ferrari engine is touted this season as being the best of the bunch, producing the most power, being very fuel efficient, and of course great ERS systems as well. But never say that it's going to be difficult for Fernando Alonso, it seems, as down into the last couple of corners they go. They're going to try and hang it all the way around the outside of Valtteri Bottas, and they do! Brilliant move from Fernando Alonso, and Bottas says, you know what, I've had enough of this, I'm coming into the pit lane. So they're going to go in now, get those tyres off. Alonso will now have the DRS open, of course, because they were that fractionally behind the Alfa Romeo into the detection zone in the final couple of corners. So now then into turn one, they've got that place still ahead of Pierre Gasly and Daniel Gilligan. and Lando Norris then just tucked in behind the other Brit as well. So down towards turn number 4 they go. DRS open on 3 of those 4 cars now, but Alonso has enough of a good drive at the corner to be able to get the move sorted. Mick Schumacher overtakes their childhood hero and mentor, some may say, in Formula 1, also may say their best friend in Formula 1, Sebastian Vettel there. So that move is done and completed. They need to now close down that gap to Yuki Tsunoda in front, and then of course after Tsunoda there is then their teammate Kevin Magnussen. Now an awful lot has been said about Magnussen, of course, coming back into Formula 1. How competitive will they be after a year or 2 out of the car? And so of course, with the big change in the regulations as well, though, it's kind of a bit of a reset for everybody. You know, everything you knew with the previous cars, with the way that they had the weight balance distributed, with the weight of the tyres themselves, of course, extra 5 kilos on each corner now, with these new 18-inch Pirelli tyres versus the 13-inch that we had in Formula 1 for a long, long time before that. So it's going to be a bit of a reset for an awful lot of drivers, I think. So I think that the difference in Magnussen and Schumacher shouldn't be that pronounced, but of course, Schumacher had that whole year last season where they were trying to prepare themselves for Formula 1. They were technically in Formula 1, but they had that time where they were just having to race around against a not very competitive teammate in a very uncompetitive car. And so it's one of those things then where, as we now see Norris diving into the pit lane then, wanting to get those soft tyres off of their car, as does Gasly and Alonso, and Lewis Hamilton into the pits as well here. So is Sergio Perez and Charles Leclerc, which means, bizarrely, for a driver in a car that is very much back of the grid material at the moment here, Daniel Gilligan, in their very first race in Formula 1, leads the Bahrain Grand Prix. There they are then, up at the front of the field in that Aramco Aston Martin Cognizant Formula 1 team car. Car number 52 then, the number they picked for their career, number that they said was inspired by their very first proper karting race, where they were taking part in a university race, of all things, in a 24-hour race, and their car had number 52 on the front. So there we go then. If it's a number that's available, might as well take it if it's got some meaning to you. And with all of the pit strategy that's going on here, then it's expected then that with the likes of also the other Aston of Seb Vettel up in P4 then, Vettel, of course, getting a podium at Azerbaijan last season for Aston, their very first in Formula 1, even when you include their very first attempt at Formula 1 back in the 60s as well. Rather than thinking of them as a brand new team necessarily. First ever podium for the team, and then of course could have been a second, could have even been a win at Hungary when it was them versus Esteban Ocon for the majority of that race. But then of course Lewis Hamilton came charging through the field at the end, managed to get Vettel on track, and then Vettel of course bumped off of the podium through a technical infringement. So there we go. Charles Leclerc then, after their pit stop, is now hot on the heels of Alexander Albon. They have put the hard tyre on, so they will be going on until the end of this race, I would imagine. And so they are now looking to get the move sorted as quickly as they can on the Thai-born British driver. Or British-born Thai driver, I should say. Want to get that the right way round, of course. So at the final turn then, Leclerc says thank you very much for the position in the DRS as Albon heads into the pit. So it's now an Aston 1-2 then, with Seb Vettel in second place and Gilligan up in the lead then. Again, with those hard tyres that they've had on since the start of this race, it's likely they'll be coming in just a few laps' time, and then that way they will filter back down the order, and then it will be a race to the end on presumably medium tyres, get themselves towards the end, try and use the extra pace then of those younger, softer compound tyres versus those on hards, for example, or those on even older mediums perhaps. And we see here Gilligan then looking very comfortable in a Formula 1 car, certainly around this circuit. Now, this is a circuit they know well, of course. They won in their F2 debut at this track, so it was a good circuit for them. Meanwhile, down the order, just outside the points, then we have this continued battle here between Daniel Ricciardo and then, of course, Kevin Magnussen, Mick Schumacher, and George Russell too. Ricciardo's been into the pits sometime to get those tyres off and also get that front wing repaired. You can see that whole wing is there now, and they're doing a great job of holding up Mick Schumacher here. Schumacher trying everywhere they can, left and right, up the inside, round the outside, trying to get by the McLaren, but Ricciardo is doing a very good job indeed. And again, we were talking earlier on about how this battle to prove yourself in Formula 1, your greatest rival is, paradoxically, your teammate. And so for Schumacher, they're going to be wanting to get by Ricciardo as much as they can and as quickly as they can, so they can get onto the back of Kevin Magnussen. And then, of course, once they're on the back of Magnussen there, they will then try and pass their teammate, and then they can assert some authority within the Haas team that they no doubt will have started to build up against Nikita Mazepin last year. But as we take a look now to Hungarian Grand Prix winner of 2021, Esteban Ocon, just on the cusp of the points now, or rather just inside the points, P10 at the moment. That's likely to be a bit more of a safe position in a moment's time because DRS open, up against Pierre Gasly, then down towards turn number 1 they go. And Gasly is going to go late on the brakes here. The car squirming under braking for the AlphaTauri there. They're going to now hang it all the way around the outside. Are they going to be able to keep the position? Yes, they will for now. But as they head down towards turn number 4 then, are things going to be easier to defend here? Maybe. Up the inside goes Pierre Gasly, defending to the inside, I should say, goes Pierre Gasly, and they hold on to the place. So Esteban Ocon then taking another look, but it's not paid off for them just yet. Charles Leclerc has also been able to get themselves past Sebastian Vettel at this stage as well, so they're back up to P2 in this one. And to give you some sense of the amount of pace they've got over Sergio Perez and the gap they have on Perez at the moment as well, Perez still down in P4, still has not caught Vettel yet, not even within a second of Vettel. So that's the ultimate pace that they are demonstrating over the Red Bull there is Charles Leclerc, so good from them. Lewis Hamilton, a bit further down the order, P5, 3 seconds off of Sergio Perez. But I'm sure that, again, with Gilligan and Vettel needing to pit at some point in the future, of course, they could try and take these hard tyres all the way to the end, but they would be disqualified if they did manage to cross the line, because you do need to run 2 different tyre compounds in a dry session in Formula 1. And there we go, Gilligan into the pits. So there we are then. So on go those medium tyres then for our former race leader. They will now officially have laps led in their Formula 1 career. Whether they never go on to score points or get a podium or a win or world championships, well, they will at least have that opportunity to have said, I led a Formula 1 Grand Prix. Other drivers with similar sort of accolade would be Marcus Winkelhock, for example. You can never stop the Winkelhock until the rain comes out a little bit stronger, of course. Then they might stop themselves. So down to P7 now is Gilligan, and once again they've got Lando Norris filling their mirrors. Now it's going to be a bit more of a tricky thing for Gilligan, and for all the drivers in fact, as they first come out the pits in this season, because of course the rules on tyre blankets have now changed. You will come out the pits with tyres that are a bit cold, and you can see that there in the understeer that Gilligan is experiencing on brand new fresh tyres. They come out, the blankets are only about 70 degrees, and you see again deep into the corner there, but managing to straighten the car up and at least get a decent enough exit to keep Norris behind. But this is really where the proof will be in the pudding here, down towards turn number 10. Very easy to lock up here, of course. Not happened for either one of these two drivers that time. And now then, they're going to need to power down this final DRS straight on the lap. No DRS, of course, for Gilligan. And they are able to somehow keep that position there. It might be that with some ERS they'll be able to keep themselves... Oh, and Norris! Norris goes round! Norris completely loses it all on their own at the exit of turn number 11, and it's gone from bad to worse for McLaren. They've got to sit there now and wait for a clear gap in the track and in the traffic before they can get going again. That gap happens to come out after Zhou Guan Yu and before Nicholas Latifi, though Latifi ends up getting that place as well. Norris down to P18. This is a disaster for the young McLaren driver who had been running as high as on the podium earlier here today. Dear oh dear, indeed. So, Vettel in the pits now as well. They will likely be repassed by their teammate. They had about an 8-second lead on their teammate earlier on, did Gilligan. So, yep, confirmation there. Gilligan up to P6 then with Esteban Ocon hunting him down in the Alpine. Right behind him, Pierre Gasly, of course, as well. Those two, the French drivers in the field, having a good old tussle. And it's a battle which, if the two cars remain relatively aligned in terms of their development, of course, should be a good one to watch for the rest of this season. There have been murmurings, of course, in the paddock that Gasly is potentially a bit unhappy with staying in AlphaTauri for so long, and so it might be that in this year, the final year of their contract with that team, they might end up looking elsewhere. Could it be that possibly Alpine looks for a second driver after Fernando Alonso potentially might leave, retire, anything like that? Though Alonso has, of course, iterated their commitment to the team before, and all the way through 2021 as a multi-year project. So it could be that Alonso stays. We will have to wait and see. But certainly, if the seat becomes available, it could be a shoe-in there for Pierre Gasly, French driver in a French team. It's not too dissimilar to what we saw when Mercedes first bought Braun GP, of course, back in 2010. They got Michael Schumacher back out of retirement, German driver, and then, of course, Nico Rosberg, driver who raced under the German flag as well, and 2016 world champion. Beat Lewis Hamilton in equal machinery, of course, as they do like to remind us. So, down the back straight we go then. Still sticking with Ocon for now. Ocon only 8 tenths behind Gilligan at this stage, so the gap there is relatively healthy between them as far as Gilligan's defence is concerned, but not enough to be able to prevent Ocon from doing that. Opening up that rear wing and now chasing down the start-finish straight to try and get that bit closer and maybe execute a move into turn number 4. It's unlikely they'll be able to get the move happening from this far back into turn 1, and certainly they don't, no. So now 6 tenths the gap between them as they go through, but on exit, on traction, it looks like Gilligan's got a very good, get a bit of purchase and grip from those much fresher medium tyres versus the hards that Ocon is running behind. So this is potentially a very, very good thing for Gilligan then, as far as their late race chances are concerned. Up at P6 right now, and if they're able to maintain this sort of a pace and this sort of a gap to those cars behind, then it could be that they're very safe from the likes of the Alpine, the two AlphaTauris as well. AlphaTauri benefiting massively from the mistakes and misfortunes of others in this race, up in 8th and 9th at the moment. And then, of course, Kevin Magnussen, who we switch to now, is then on the fringes of the points as well. Would pick up 1 point for Haas if things were to end as they are right now. But as things are right this second, let's give you a quick run through of the order then, whilst things are the same. So, Leclerc, Perez, Hamilton, Alonso, Bottas, Gilligan, Ocon, Gasly, Tsunoda, Magnussen, Ricciardo, Russell, Schumacher, Vettel, Albon, Zhou Guanyu, Norris, Latifi, Verstappen, and then Sainz, of course, out of the race. So Max Verstappen still at the back of the field here, so maybe another incident for the Red Bull driver. They had been carving their way back up through the field earlier on, but doesn't look as though it's worked out for them all in the best way. So, down in 19th for now, and unless another safety car comes out, you'd have to say that even for a driver as talented as Max Verstappen, with a car as good as Max Verstappen has, that is a hell of a task, really, to be able to come back from that. Down the start-finish straight we go then. Magnussen within half a second now of Yuki Tsunoda, with DRS open as well. But the AlphaTauris, both of them seem to have a very good straight-line speed setup here today, or just a very low-drag car. Same thing could be said as well for Esteban Ocon, who's now lost the back of Gilligan, in fact, as far as DRS is concerned. 1.2 seconds now the gap between those two drivers, so Gilligan is, for the time being, at least safe from any attack from behind. Again, lending to a great deal of comfort for them and for the Aston Martin team, I'm sure. And reminder, of course, is when the opportunity comes where faster cars end up having mistakes and problems, you need to seize it with both hands here. We look at the likes of both the McLarens, of course, for Sainz and Verstappen. You know, those cars should be up in the points as well. So with those four cars being there, that would bump Gilligan back down to P11 at this stage, or to P10, I should say. So that would then mean that, they'd be looking at just the 1 point. It wouldn't look quite as heroic a drive as it does at the moment here, but yeah, the safety car really played into their hands and to Vettel's hands earlier on, of course, allowing them to get that bit further up the field and into this race on those hard tyres, and then forcing others to deviate from their strategy. It meant that, of course, they had that Aston 1-2 for a little while. It was a really good bit of strategy play there from Aston Martin to gamble there, but of course it was only that. It was only a gamble. If we'd had no safety car, you would be seeing them much further down the order at this stage. So then, onto the start-finish straight once again then for this battle of the French. And Esteban Ocon versus Pierre Gasly. Gasly has the DRS open. You can see there from their dash on the steering wheel, there's a green light there. That shows that they had the overtake button in use. And so through turn number 1 they go then. And will it be a good drive up to turn 4? It looks like Ocon's had a better traction on exit there from the two cars. And maybe he's using a bit of ERS themselves as well to try and stay ahead. DRS again for Gasly here. And no opportunity to overtake into turn number 4 then. So this battle then is continuing to rage on. Other battles close on circuit at the moment, Tsunoda and Magnussen. And then, of course, behind Magnussen, we've then got Ricciardo and Russell as well. Very close to one another. Russell very close, in fact, to the back of Ricciardo. Only 3/10 separating those two drivers, who we could just briefly see there coming in towards turn number 8. And then, as we start to look further elsewhere in the field, Zhou Guanyu very close to the back of Alex Albon. Could be a move on there to get up into P15. Very impressive debut so far for Zhou. And now as we take a look elsewhere, up towards the sharp end of the field, however, all the gaps relatively big now. 4.2 seconds between Sergio Perez and Charles Leclerc, our race leader. And Lewis Hamilton 4.8 behind Perez. Alonso then further 5.5 seconds behind Hamilton. Bottas 3.9 seconds behind Alonso, 5 seconds between Bottas and Gilligan. And then Ocon has been able to now just get themselves back within DRS range of Gilligan here as they head down, cross the DRS detection line. It was very close between them there. I'm not sure which way that will go, personally, but we'll find out in a moment's time. Does that rear wing flip open for the Alpine? No, it does not. So Ocon is now going to have to wait and see then. And George Russell, meanwhile, is having a drag race now with Daniel Ricciardo. Russell getting ahead around the outside in the final turn then, and down towards turn number 1 they go. Trying to hang it all the way around the outside. The McLaren now. Russell is going to try and stick it up the inside in turn number 2, but the McLaren swings around the outside. Daniel Ricciardo says, no, you're not going to get me there. You're going to have to work a bit harder for that. And also with DRS now, because they were passed into turn number 1 by the Mercedes. They're able to keep ahead, and then into turn number 4 they go. Round the outside goes Daniel Ricciardo, and they hold on to P11 in this race, but not maybe for another couple of corners. Russell tries an audacious move up the inside, but it doesn't come off for them. Down towards turn number 8, then into the hairpin. No move this time from George Russell. They think that maybe not this time. And instead, they're going to hold on to the position for now, try and just get themselves as best positioned as they can to maybe make a run down towards turn number 11 here. It's very close between them, or possibly onto the next lap. Lap 22 of 29 at the moment here in the Bahrain Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc continuing to lead the way, although in the last lap, there must have been a mistake from Leclerc somewhere, because they've lost 4/10 to Sergio Perez. That gap now down to 3.8 seconds. So either a mistake from Leclerc or just a fantastic lap from Perez. One of the two. Possibly the latter, because of course the gap from Perez to Hamilton has now massively increased to 5.4 seconds versus that 4.8 it was previously. Down the back straight we go once again then, and Russell's going to need to try something a bit different this time if they want to get this done. They managed to try and get a move round the outside on Ricciardo in that final corner last time round, but then they just ended up not getting that slipstream down the start finish straight. They do have it this time though. DRS open for the Mercedes. Mercedes works team versus Mercedes customer team, and works team of the past. Up in towards turn number 1 they go. Daniel Ricciardo is going to try and hang it round the outside again as they did last time round, but this time it's up the inside for Ricciardo into turn number 2, and that means that they lose the position now to George Russell, and now they might lose another one as well. Mick Schumacher is looking racy there in the background, but Ricciardo now trying to send it back round the outside of Russell into turn number 4. It's so close between these drivers, but this time Ricciardo has to yield. Does not work for them this time, unfortunately for the Australian. And that means that McLaren's chances of points ebb further away in this first round of the season. It's been a good recovery from them after what happened in pre-season testing with all their brake issues, especially on the front brakes in particular. But this car then is definitely capable of more, but with this fight with a Mercedes, they're losing out here and potentially losing positions to those cars behind as well. Getting offline, getting those tyres scrubbed and all the rest of it could end up opening up an opportunity for the likes of Mick Schumacher to make a move. But that's something which we'll have to keep an eye on for the time being. For now, Russell's not convincingly driving away from Ricciardo here. The gap's still under a second between them as they go onto the back straight now. If Ricciardo gets a good exit out of here, they should be able to stay within a second all the way down towards the final corner here. But as it is, it looks like a much better exit for Russell, and so if they go down towards the detection point, it's going to be very, very close, but Ricciardo makes it. So they're going to have DRS down the start finish straight. It's not going to get them within any sort of touching distance to have another attempt on Russell at all, but things will at least be easier for them in defence against Mick Schumacher. So as they head down the start finish straight then, Schumacher with that Ferrari power unit in the back there. Oh, and no DRS it looks like for Ricciardo there. So they did come across the line within a second of George Russell. Could it be that there's a DRS malfunction on that McLaren possibly? Maybe. They are within a second this time. No, it's open this time. So maybe just choosing not to use it or having a brief fault. Down the start finish straight then, Pierre Gasly we now go back over to as they continue in their struggle to hunt down Esteban Ocon. And Ocon now has gotten much, much closer to the back of Gilligan, although a big mistake it looks like from Ocon there, as the gap briefly went up to as high as a second now after being as low as 6/10. But now back stabilised between the two at about 7.5 tenths there, something in that region. And Gasly then looking on from the background now. It could be that, like other instances we've seen in this race, if Ocon's able to get a good run on Gilligan here and Gasly stays tucked in behind, then it could be with Gilligan offline. It could be that they lose 2 positions in one corner here. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not Ocon is going to be able to get that move done. And if they do, of course, how much of a fight Gilligan is going to be able to put up against Gasly behind. So down the back straight they go. 7.5 tenths the gap between them, so this will be DRS available down the start finish straight for Ocon. Ocon then takes the exit then, and it looks as though they've gotten a good launch off of the corner. They've been able to gain some time on Gilligan there, a good half a tenth or so as the DRS then opens. They're not completely tucked into the wheel tracks there, so they're not getting the absolute optimum slipstream it seems, but as they head down towards turn number 1, things are much, much closer now. 4 tenths between the two cars. And then as they go through turn number 2, then it looks like different lines being used there. Gilligan trying to straight line things as much as they possibly can on the exit, whereas Ocon using more of the track width there. Up towards turn number 4 they go then. Gilligan not moving to the inside to try and defend that one, knowing that they had enough of a lead then over those cars in front, behind I should say. And now then, it'll be another lap then, following on behind the Aston Martin for the Alpine. Unless, of course, Ocon wants to try something a bit more risky somewhere else in the circuit. Turn 11 could be an opportunity. If Gilligan's tyres have started to go off here and those hards are still working for the Alpine, then it could be a bad exit on bad traction out of turn number 10. Of course, one of the most difficult corners on the Formula 1 calendar. Could see Ocon drawing alongside up towards turn number 11 here. With the DRS in use here, it could be that things are a bit easier too. Down towards turn number 11 they go then. Ocon thinks about it, certainly has a look up the inside, tries the move as well, but never got alongside. And so Gilligan shuts the door, as they have every right to do. That's then gained them a few car lengths in terms of the gap there, and also then gives an opportunity for Pierre Gasly to now try and give a move to Ocon here, either down the back straight or down the start-finish straight. We'll keep an eye on this one then, see how things go between the pair of them, and Ocon then in the middle of this fight. They have everything to gain and to lose at this stage as well. Gasly has nothing to lose, of course, other than the points that they have already accumulated by being in P8, but as they go down the start-finish straight once more, it's DRS for both of the two pursuing cars. Gilligan, of course, no DRS. Down towards turn number 1, the gaps are closing up between all three cars. Only 2/10 between all of them as they head down towards turn number 1 then. And things still very, very close indeed. Let's keep an eye then on Ocon. How much of a good exit will they get out of turn number 3? Looks like relatively good, so up towards 4 they'll go then. Doesn't look like they'll be close enough though to get the move done on Gilligan, but crucially they've been able to keep themselves ahead of Pierre Gasly. Meanwhile, a bit further down the order, Zhou Guanyu has been able to get themselves by Alex Albon, and Alex Albon back by Zhou Guanyu, in fact. Look at this fight here between two cars towards the back end of the field. There's no points on offer for P15, but they're going to fight tooth and nail for it anyway. Could be crucial come the end of the year. We've had it before where teams have finished on the same number of points. Zhou manages to get themselves up and in front of the Williams. Good move there from the Alfa Romeo driver. But yeah, has been the case in the past before where teams finishing on the same number of points, and then of course the count back means that it's just one results difference, means they are able to take the extra position and of course the extra prize money that comes from finishing higher in the Constructors' Championship. So Albon then, DRS open, trying to get themselves back within a striking distance of Zhou Guanyu here, and things are looking like it could maybe happen here for them. They've been able to keep nice and close throughout the back end of the second sector, where it is a bit more tricky to follow with all the tight and twisty parts of the circuit there. The second sector in general, very difficult to follow. First and third sectors, much easier to follow. The corners that are there are slower, and then of course much bigger, longer straights as well. So into the final couple of turns then. And out goes Alex Albon down the start-finish straight, but George Russell is the car that we keep an eye on for the moment, as they had a look at the back of Kevin Magnussen, but Magnussen decided to shut the door, decided to move in the braking zone there. A bit naughty there from the Dane, but showing that they've lost none of their fighting, racing, Viking spirit at this stage, and things looking very, very close between them. And if Magnussen's able to hold on here and keep George Russell at bay, it means points for Haas, or a single solitary point for Haas in this first round of the season. And meanwhile, look at this then, the fight that we were looking at earlier on between the French drivers and then, of course, the Aston of Gilligan. Things very close between Ocon and Gilligan here. The fight is coming down to the wire. Lap 27 and 29 here in this race. And so things are looking very close in the final closing stages. Could be that Gilligan has a bit of a trickier one here, trying to get themselves ahead of those cars behind, and trying to finish ahead of those cars behind, I should say. Those tyres definitely seem to have worn off, and even if those tyres are still in a good enough condition, the Aston just not a good enough car as the Alpine or the AlphaTauri. Kevin Magnussen then continuing to hold off George Russell here. This is a great drive by the Dane, and they are going to hope that Russell does not get past them here down this back straight, or if they do, then it means that Magnussen should then be able to get DRS into the main straight. Oh, who was ahead there? I could barely call that one. In fact, I won't call that one. Round the outside goes Kevin Magnussen then, and up towards the DRS line. Who has it? Neither of them. Neither car has DRS. It's a drag race then. Just a straight up drag race from car configuration and setup and engine and all the rest of it down towards turn number 1. Magnussen's going to try and hang it round the outside, but we've seen time and time again in this race, if you're on the inside in turn number 2, it doesn't tend to work for you, and Magnussen loses out on a point. And oh dear, Esteban Ocon spins all on their own. They lose the back end of the car, and that means Magnussen back in the points. Magnussen manages to reclaim P10. Ocon has to wait for a number of cars to come past. And now this means game on once again for Kevin Magnussen. They've now got to hold on for this and one more lap ahead of Daniel Ricciardo to be able to get bag a point for Haas at the end of this one. If they do so, it would have been a heroic drive from them. Having started in P11, it doesn't seem as though it's the biggest jump in terms of where they started versus where they finished. But yeah, that has been a great bit of a battle there. Good scrap with drivers in much faster machinery. And given, again, that he's only just come back into Formula 1 after a year on the sidelines, this is great racing from Kevin Magnussen. Now then, this will be where the proof will lie in the pudding, because down the back straight then, the Ferrari grunt powers Magnussen to sticking within a second there of George Russell in front. That means down the start-finish straight at least. They should be protected from Daniel Ricciardo behind, unless, of course, Ricciardo has something up their sleeve to be able to pull that McLaren alongside and up the inside and towards turn number 1. And Magnussen then also closing up on Russell down the start-finish straight there should then allow them to get DRS again on the run up towards turn number 4. And then if they're able to get it once more out of 10 and towards 11, then it could be that they're able to hold on for the rest of the final lap, which Charles Leclerc has started. So this, in fact, could be that final lap. In fact, I think it is. I would dare say it is the final lap of the Grand Prix here. So, Charles Leclerc from Sergio Perez, and Leclerc then, we take a look now to see them going down the back straight. It has been a very impressive drive from the Ferrari driver, and Sergio Perez has done very well to close the gap, but they didn't close it enough. Out the final turn we come, and red light spells danger for the rest of the Formula 1 grid as Ferrari are back on top with Charles Leclerc. They take the first win of the season, and Sergio Perez comes home in P2 with Lewis Hamilton set to claim P3. 3 different constructors on the podium, and boy, do we have a season on our hands, ladies and gentlemen. And then it's Fernando Alonso who will come home P4. Valtteri Bottas then likely to come home P5. And then coming home in P6 after them if they're able to hold off Pierre Gasly for just a few more corners. One more corner, in fact, with flashing red lights on the back of the cars showing they've burned up all their battery. Daniel Gilligan, in their very first race in Formula 1, comes across the line in P6 ahead of Pierre Gasly, Yuki Tsunoda, George Russell and Kevin Magnussen. Comes home P10 ahead of Daniel Ricciardo by a half a second to claim a point for Haas. More points than they scored all of last year. So brilliant effort from the drivers here today, especially from Charles Leclerc in that Ferrari. And look at this then, that Ferrari then emblazoned with its celebratory livery, celebratory overalls for their 75th anniversary. And well, this then has been a great showing from Charles Leclerc. If they can continue this form and this pace throughout the rest of the season, then, well, this is a fantastic beginning to their championship challenge in 2022. So out onto the podium they will come then, flanked by a Red Bull driver and a Mercedes driver. It's been a great drive from Charles Leclerc, Sergio Perez and Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton, of course, one of those drivers who you have to give all credit to today. Managed to use the safety car well, kept it clean, and rose all the way from P14 up to P3. So, great racing from them. That's it from us then for the first round of the season. If you have liked, then please follow, subscribe, like the video, and we will be back on Wednesday for our next round of the season. Round number 2 in Saudi Arabia. We hope to see you then. Goodbye.